This series of 9 videos is about our vacation in 2017 to Yellowstone National Park. Part 5 is a continuation of our day in Part 4 on September 17th. After a beautiful morning visiting Fairy Falls, Imperial Geyser, and Grand Prismatic Spring, we headed back to the place we went to first, the Upper Geyser Basin and Old Faithful. We had already visited parts of the Upper Basin on a cold rainy day in Part 2. We visited Biscuit Basin and Black Sand Basin. Today, on a beautiful sunny day, we were to visit Geyser Hill and the trail to Morning Glory Pool. When we got to Anemone Geyser, water was draining back into the hole, not coming out. Anemone is actually a paired geyser, and it didn't take long before this happened in the one nearest to us. Just as fast as it started, it stopped and the water drained back into the hole. But then, the one furthest from us did the same thing. Just down from Anemone is Beehive Geyser. With Old Faithful as the backdrop, we decided to hang out here until it erupted. We could see the Old Faithful Lodge, the Visitor Center, and the Old Faithful Inn in the background. Beehive never erupted while we were there, but there was some activity. We had already seen Old Faithful erupt on our first day in the park, but this day would provide us with a much clearer and different view. It didn't disappoint. We moved on from Old Faithful and Beehive along the boardwalk. There were little waterfalls, and more fascinating bacterial mats. This day we were actually able to see the hot springs and other features like Heart Spring without having to cope with steam obscuring them. The Lion Group is made up of 4 geysers. Goggles Spring kind of looks like a pair of swim goggles. Ear Spring could just as easily have been called Kidney Spring. I'm not sure how this feature inspired the name Beach. Aurum, the Latin name for gold, looks like someone decorated it with small stones. Doublet Pool was intricate and gorgeous. From Geyser Hill, we could look down the Firehole River to Castle Geyser, which we would see more closely later. Every hydrothermal feature in the park is different. Some draw you in to where you can imagine the workings and the plumbing of the system underground. Some have been the site of tragedies, like this one that killed a Belgian tourist when he fell in before there were boardwalks. Grand Geyser is not the tallest geyser in the world, or even in the park, but it is the tallest one that can be predicted. We would see it erupt from a distance later. Giant Geyser looked like a huge conch shell was buried underground and the tip of it was sticking out. There was a little activity, but it did not erupt while we were there. There are 3 other geysers in the Grand Group, including Bijou and Catfish, seen here, and Mastiff. Grotto Geyser was one of the most interesting from both the south and the north. Some features were poorly named if the goal is to keep people out of them. This spa would do some serious damage. Riverside Geyser is similar to Veteran Geyser in the Norris Basin because they both erupt sideways more than up. Riverside shoots out over the Firehole River, and it is one of the predictable geysers, though it did not erupt while we were there. Morning Glory Pool is at the apex of the trail from Old Faithful. The color of Morning Glory has been different in the past and is related to the temperature of the water. People have thrown so much trash into the pool that it has clogged the vent below, which has caused the water temperature to drop. More microorganisms can live in the cooler temperatures, so the center when we visited was green instead of blue. If the center was hotter, the bacteria reflecting green would not be able to live, and you would just see the blue reflected from the water itself. As we headed back to the visitor center, we saw Grand Geyser erupting from across the river. Even from this distance, it was impressive. In fact, it may have been more impressive that we could see the people in front of it for scale. If you look closely, you can see a second smaller eruption from a feature just to its left. The last thing we saw before arriving back at the visitor center was Castle Geyser. On our way back to the campsite after a beautiful day, we saw this eagle overlooking the river. Part 6 takes us back to the canyon area again, as well as to the northern parts of the park from Mammoth Hot Springs to the Lamar Valley.